Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are so glad that you're all here tonight, and we are all looking forward to our wonderful panelists and learning from them. I'm Dr. Catherine Welberg. I am the Dean of the newly named School of Sciences, Mathematics, and Education here at Marymount University. When I say new, I've actually been here almost 2 months, so I'm still learning all kinds of things. But one of the things that I have most definitely learned is how fantastic our programs here are, and our faculty and our students. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this evening. So I'm here learning with you, and thank you in advance to our panelists, and we very much look forward to this evening. And so it is my absolute pleasure to ask our moderator to come forward. Dr. Tammy Davis is a faculty member, full professor here at Marymount University, one of our amazing faculty, and she will guide us through the evening. So thank you, Tammy.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And welcome. Dr. Wilberg has hit the ground running in our School of, yes, all of those things, science, math, and education. It is my pleasure tonight. First of all, I'll tell you, I'm Tammy. I wasn't prepared for this, for sure, and that picture is a while ago, but anyway. I teach full-time in primarily the school counseling program, but a lot of students also see me in the theories of counseling class. So the clinical mental health and the pastoral clinical mental health students see me in that role. But we're a big family in the counseling department, and so the purpose of tonight is to give you an opportunity, if you're thinking about exploring a degree and a career in counseling, or if you're already a student and you're kind of wanting to know, what can I do with my degree once I get it? I have brought to you the best of the best. I have brought to you the cream of the crop. Some of our wonderful graduates who have used their counseling degrees in a variety of ways. I would like to introduce Amy Clay. And Amy is a graduate, and I'm not going to tell you about their jobs because they're going to do that. Amy is a graduate of our clinical mental health counseling program. Emily Baldwin is a graduate of our school counseling program and a practicing school counselor. Jen Fredette is a graduate of our pastoral clinical mental health program and also an adjunct professor for us. Otis McKenzie is a graduate of our dual degree program in counseling and forensic psychology, forensic and legal psychology. And he has a lot of stuff to tell you about his career trajectory. And Emily Snyder, who also graduated from our school counseling program, but used her school counseling degree in a little bit of a different way, and she'll tell you all about that. So what the process is for tonight is going to be very informal, even though it is being videotaped and a lot of pictures, but we're not going to get nervous about that. We're going to have each of our panelists...
They're not in focus.
Yes, they're not in focus, right? We're going to have each of our panelists tell you a little bit about their journey. Both their journey in counseling, kind of the path that led them to counseling, and we'll have them do that, and then we'll ask them to tell you a little bit about their journey after they graduated from Marymount with their counseling degree and what happened with that. So we're going to give them five to 8 minutes or so to do that. If one of them goes too long, I'll give them this slide because they're going to want to tell you a lot about that. And then what I'd like to do is open the floor to you all, because obviously you have come with some specific questions, and we want to make sure that we have time to get to those questions. I have asked our panelists if they are willing to stay around afterward. We did not give out their contact information just because we know that's also a personal choice, but I have asked them if they're willing to share their contact information or if they have cards or things like that, and you want to speak specifically to one of them, if they're willing to hang around just a little bit and answer some questions for you and maybe give you their contact information, because they're all a wealth of information and they're all really, really, really great grads of our program. So anyway, with that, we will start, and we will start with Amy Clay. So how did you come to counseling?
Yes.
And then what have you done with your degree?
Okay. All that in one. Would you rather? Yes. Or do you want to just do all?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Do it all.
Do it all.
I don't want to speak too little or too much. Okay, my name is Amy Clay, and I own a private practice called Sunstone Counseling, which I'll get to in a little bit. So I think my educational journey just thinking, when I even go way back to high school, I always loved people. I remember David had a class called Relationships. I was so intrigued by it. We just talked about, people, relationships with people, how they work, how they don't, kind of family systems, if you think back at it. And then as I was going into college, I was just very curious about people, sociology. I didn't really know how to apply it, and then finally I made a decision to get a bachelor's degree in social work. So I think it's important because it did kind of give like a different educational background than maybe like a psychology degree, because it definitely has that macro and micro perspective. So it definitely had a lot about policy, a lot about how to help human beings in a broad way. I did some studying in Nicaragua and kind of got some world perspective. But when I came back and I was trying to figure out what to do with grad school, first of all, I couldn't figure out how to afford grad school. So a natural progression would be getting a social work degree. But I knew I wanted to do more of what I might describe as one-on-one work with people. So luckily, I just kept on following my nose, and I found that Marymount had a counseling degree. Well, no, I found that Marymount had a job. This is an important part of the journey. Marymount had a job where you could go to school and get some credits paid for if you were pursuing a master's degree. So back then we had like paper catalogs, and I was looking through it to see what could I do, and I found the master's program in counseling psychology, I think it was called then. And I just pursued it, and I feel so grateful that I did find this perfect match, because it was really oriented towards how do you work with people, the theory, the individual work, all the stuff that you guys know, the classes that give you a good foundation for working with individuals and families and couples and what have you. So it's a windy journey. Am I doing the right thing by describing this? Okay,
You're fabulous.
I'm missing big gaps of it, but Marymount became a home not only through my job, because I just loved Marymount through and through, because I was able to work with all the different departments, but I was also able to get my master's degree here. Marymount does a great job, the counseling program does a great job in regards to the clinical experiences. I did have the background of, in the social work program, I did have 3 clinical experiences under my belt. Which I do think helps. I do know that some people go into getting a master's degree and they don't have any clinical experience whatsoever. So I'll just put a little plug that if you want to do this kind of work, it is a good time even to get some volunteer work, even at Crisis Link. I know a lot of people do that just to get a little bit of training and experience, or some like volunteer-based work, just to get your feet wet and get exposed to different populations, different ways that people work with people. So where was I? So I'm in the program, loving it, learning a lot, and then finally getting to the clinical piece where you have to do practicum and then an internship. So back then, Marymount was pretty clear about wanting to make sure people had experience in substance abuse and or working with people with chronic mental health conditions. And therefore, I found myself working with exactly that population, not knowing that in the long term, that's not really what I wanted to do for my career and the rest of my life, but knowing fundamentally I needed to have exposure and experience, not just through textbook, but through people, of what it looks like to be working with somebody that struggles with, drug addiction, what have you. There's so many different experiences. So. The educational piece was great at Marymount, but really you don't know what's going on until you're right there with people experiencing those things. So it's nice to kind of have the knowledge, but great to have the support of a clinical supervisor on site, and then also your Marymount professor. So anyway, it came time for me to find an internship, and I knew that I wanted to go more into private practice. I had a desire to sort of have my own autonomy. I didn't necessarily want to work for a government agency. I kind of knew that from my experiences in the social work clinical experiences I went through. So I was lucky enough to find a woman that had an organization called the Center for Wellbeing. It was really just her, and she was just working with clients, and her and I hooked up, and she and I co-created an internship experience, and that's where I learned a lot about private practice and what I do today. What else could I say? I could say so much. I mean, that was a really long time ago, nearly 20 years, and I did work also in colleges, like at Northern Virginia Community College, here at Marymount, working on the clinical, helping people find their practicum and internship. So I always kind of kept another job, really for income, and then always kind of just kept the private practice thing rolling. So can I come to kind of today?
You can come to today. What you do right now.
So over the years, the Center for Wellbeing changed. We actually made it into a bigger business with 4 partners, and then we later dissolved it just because 2 people moved. And that is when the kind of birth of Sunstone Counseling came. We have now 3 offices, one in Falls Church, one in Old Town Alexandria, and I did bring flyers if anybody wants one. Like 2 weeks ago, or September 1st, we opened an office in McLean. And that one, it specifically works with children, adolescents, and their families. And the same thing is following our nose. 2 things kind of happened. We kept on assessing the needs of the community, which isn't actually that hard to assess. They call you and tell you what's going on. And you say, okay, how can we meet your need? Some of the clinicians at Sunstone were skilled in that, and then sometimes we said, hey, we really need to hire more people that work with children. So then we kept growing in that way. And second to that, we do offer the internship program, which is near and dear to my heart because that's something that I wanted to find. It was hard to find, and I know how important and how hard it is to find clinical experiences clinical experiences with a supervisor. So we keep that program running at Sunstone, and then interns naturally turn often into residents and then often into full-fledged licensed employees. So now we have 25 counselors. I should have counted before I left. The mass majority are Marymount students. We started to try to diversify a little bit because, I mean, come on, there are some other programs out there and some other skill sets, and they might bring something else to the table. Maybe, I don't know, I'm biased, but we do have people from Hopkins. We do have people, we have 2 interns right now from Wake Forest. So we have diversified a little bit. We have another social worker, but we're mainly LPC based. I can say so much about Sunstone, but we really do try to meet the needs of the community. So the McLean office is really unfortunately developed because we are finding so many needs in the younger populations that they're really coming. I don't know, maybe it's fortunate. Maybe we're doing preventative stuff. That's what we're hoping. We see, so across the age spectrum, and then in regards to the reasons people are coming in, they vary quite a bit too. But we are kind of a typical private practice, but have the interns available to really meet the needs of the community that maybe can't afford, licensed. We're not in a network for any insurance or anything like that. So it can be quite expensive for some. But we do have highly qualified people to work on some pretty hard issues. So I'm kind of an advocate for counselors in regards to professionalism, and they do earn their money, and it's not volunteerism by any stretch, but we do try to meet needs of the whole community by some of these amazing interns. It's the best deal. If anybody needs counseling, go see our interns because they're such a good deal. So that's it. I think that's probably...
That was good.
Okay. Thank you.
You were 10 minutes. That was good.
Oh, that's a long
That was
time.
good. That's good. It's a long story.
My name's Emily Baldwin. I am currently a counselor in a middle school, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how I ended up there. I did not decide on a career in counseling until I was pretty well into my 30s, and so I had a long period before that of trying some other jobs, all of which I think contributed in one way or another to ultimately being in counseling, and I'm thankful for each of those jobs. I think they've sort of deepened my perspective and helped me be a better counselor. So I studied philosophy in undergrad, went to a really tiny school called St. John's, where that's all they really offer. I was just interested in great books and reading and thinking and discussing, and that's all. And I thought that's what I'd do forever. After I had the opportunity to have some experiences in laboratories during the summer when I was there, and so I went into research science when I graduated from undergrad, Department of Defense in Bethesda, and I worked there for a couple years. I loved it, but it was sort of isolating and by nature very repetitive. And I happened to be volunteering for an organization while I was working there and just really loved it, fell in love with it. And it was a nonprofit in DC, in Southeast, which I ended up working for, and I ended up moving to right next to where they operated. I still live there, and that was about 10 years ago. And so with that group, a lot of our work, we did after-school programs focused on helping children who were falling behind come up to grade level in reading and math, and then we did wraparound services to support the families and the community. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to spend time in different schools. And what I noticed in those schools was just the difference made, the difference that can, or the impact of sort of the social, emotional supports and how much of an impact they have or don't have if they're not there on the children in the school. And so at that point I decided, I was interested in participating in that type of work. I did some research. My mother is actually a Marymount graduate and is actually involved in similar work, or was involved, she retired recently, to what Emily Snyder is going to talk to you guys about. And so she had great things to say about Marymount. I looked into it, and I just really, I loved the size and how personal the approach was. And so I came here for the school counseling program. It was a small cohort, about 12 of us. We work, one thing I like about it is that we did have classes with students in, do they call it community mental health
It's not
counseling?
clinical. It
Okay.
was community.
It keeps changing names.
And it was something different when Amy went through it.
Yeah, I think it was something different my first year to my second year. But and so just being trained alongside them, and then also having courses specific to us as school counselors, because there are some real differences in the job. And then I went into an elementary school. I did my internship in an elementary, I did my practicum in a middle. I liked them both, but I thought elementary was more where I wanted to be. And I worked there for 5 years. I loved it. It was fantastic. I love being in a school. If you are going to be a school counselor, you have to love being in a school. That has to be an environment that you want to be a part of. And being a part of a large team and working together with a lot of different adults in close collaboration. And so in addition to doing the counseling with the children, there's also that element of it. And I really love that. It's one of the things that I'm passionate about in my job. After 5 years, I made the decision for a variety of reasons, one of which was just because I always sort of gravitated towards the older elementary students, 5th and 6th grade. In Fairfax County, 6th grade is part of elementary. I don't know if I agree with that, but it is. And so I loved working with that group. I like the little kids, but I really enjoyed counseling with that age group. And then I also, living in DC, I was commuting to Fairfax, the city of Fairfax, every day, which was brutal. So I am now at a middle school in Alexandria, still part of Fairfax County Public Schools. I love it. It is very different. I'm getting lots of time to do counseling. I would say even more than I did at elementary. And I am with a team now of counselors rather than just, so my caseload has dropped from about 500 to about 250, which is wonderful. And I just love it. And I know that probably, based on years past, I'm guessing probably the vast majority of you may not be interested in schoolwork. I will say that some of the people that started, I'm thinking of a couple people who ended up as school counselors who started in this program in the clinical mental, whatever they call it now. But I would just encourage you to be open to it, especially if you're interested in working with children and adolescents, because the type of work you're able to do with them and the times you're able to see them in the moment of issue, of whatever's happening, you just have a lot of ability to impact them in a different way in a different way than a counselor outside of school. Both important, but it's just it's a unique position to be in. I will say I work closely if I have a student who's seeing a clinician outside of school. Another part of my job I really love is working in collaboration with them to reinforce what they're working on outside of school. I would say that's an important collaboration to really make sure that what's happening outside of school is reinforced in school, because they're there at least half their waking hours. So, but yeah, anybody who's interested in schools, I'd love to talk to you more about it.
I love it. I don't want to work in school.
Collaborate.
Although I guess I kind of do work in school.
Yeah, you
right?
do. Yeah.
And what Emily didn't mention too, that you have done, and I think some of the other school counselors have done, is you can still take classes to become eligible to become an LPC.
Yeah.
So there's still there's lots of leeway. You don't have to always be in school all the time.
No. And I'm also, so that's a thing too.
Yes. I was thinking about it because we were just talking about it. So I was trying to think of how I want to tell the story, because I feel like I tell the story on a semi-regular basis. I think today I want to tell you guys how it started with Encyclopedia Brown. So I hated the outdoors growing up. My mother would punish me by sending me outside to play. I'd much rather stay inside and read. And Encyclopedia Brown had the ideal life, right? He could solve the mystery in 2 pages. And I could never figure it out, never. I went and saw A Simple Favor last week, and I thought I had it figured out. I did not have it figured out. It's an excellent movie, you should see it. So I've always loved the idea that stories hold all the clues you need, and you don't always know until you get to the end of the story. And so I've been on this mission to try to figure out, what is the end of the story? And the longer I do this work, the more I'm like, oh, but I kind of like the middle. So to back up again, I grew up in a very religious, very conservative context. And one of the most important parts of that was the Bible, just filled with stories, filled with mysteries that I was constantly trying to figure out. I was given the answers of what they ought to be, and that just never rang true for me. It seemed like there had to be at least 2 more pages to how to make sense, how to make meaning of this. And so I kept trying to figure it out, did not go over super well in the conservative church I grew up in. And by the time I got to college, I thought, oh, I should probably do something sensible. I will be a business major. I will take accounting and macroeconomics. I did a good job, actually, in accounting. And macroeconomics makes absolutely no sense. I'm sorry for those of you who really dig it. Someday I'll figure it out, but it still makes no sense. The numbers just change around. And while I was taking that, I went to a Christian school, not a conservative school, but you had to take Religion 101, which I thought, man, I'm going to ace this because it's Sunday school. I know the whole Bible by heart. And I didn't, because it was this whole new way to interpret the text. It was like discovering Encyclopedia Brown for the Bible. And I thought, well, I'll just do this. I'll be a religion major. Never mind that I still wasn't sure if when it could be in ministry, and I'm still praying that God would bring the most magical, perfect man to lead me, which he didn't. He brought me a really awesome, amazing husband, but he doesn't lead me. So as I went through trying to figure out the Bible, trying to figure out religion, I was like, oh crap, I majored in religion. What do you do with a major in religion, a bachelor's in religion? Who is going to hire you? I guess I could become a banker. I didn't become a banker. Instead, I went to grad school. I got my master's in divinity down at Wake Forest, and now I'm also super intrigued. Sam Gladding is a magical being in their counseling program there. He wrote, I think, the intro. Yeah. He's wonderful, but this isn't about Sam. So I went and started in the MDiv program, and it was, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to tell the truth, and who gets to own the truth, and does anyone get to own the truth? How do you lead a lock-in for 30 middle schoolers and make sure they don't have sex while you're taking care of them? I learned all these really interesting things, and I also learned that I absolutely did not want to work in church. Not because I didn't want to work in that institution, but because I wanted to sit with people with more depth and really hear their stories and not have to manage a large organization. So I met my husband, who was training as a shaman at the time, which was not who I thought I would end up with. And he's not a shaman now, but that's what he was doing when I met him. We were in grad school. So we took a year, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought, I'll go get a PhD in biblical literature. I'll learn how to keep retelling these stories that have been told only one way, only one narrative, and often been used to hurt and harm others, to oppress large groups of people, or maybe just one small person. And I did a year of AmeriCorps service in a literacy agency, And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to learn German and try to remember my Greek. I could just work with people and help them learn to retell their stories. So applied to Marymount, wanted to go someplace where people would understand that I was not aiming to sell Jesus or the Bible in session, but that my training, my curiosity, and my knowledge base really adds depth to the work. So came to Marymount. It was pretty fun. I made a whole list of things I was absolutely not going to do. I was not going to work with people with schizophrenia. I was not going to go into private practice. I was probably not going to work evenings, because who wants to do that? And absolutely never was I going to work on Sundays ever again. Done all of those things. Loved working with people with schizophrenia. Interned at Fairfax County's Community Services Board, and loved it. Like, people with schizophrenia, not always, I mean, they're people, so they're different person to person, but beautiful and had depth and spent time in the unconscious and got stuck there, and helping them untangle that was so fun. Worked with a range of other serious mental illnesses. Liked it a lot, liked getting snow days paid, but I was never meant to work in an institution. I am a free bird in many ways and wanted to work for myself. And so I thought I was going to work for myself. I started in a group practice. I thought, oh, this is private practice, I'm all by myself, I can do whatever I want. That's not exactly how group practice works, and there's some better group practices and some not so great. Mine was in the middle. But the longer I stayed there, the more I realized that I kind of wanted to use my accounting skills from way back when, and the marketing skills I briefly gained from the Business 101 class I took in 2002, and realized how much fun it would be to own my own thing, do my own thing. So that's where I am now. Literally, I'm not totally sure where we are directionally. I think I'm backwards, just down the street on Fairfax. See about 20 to 25 people a week. And often it's people who were very much like me, so alone in their story and only knowing how to tell it just one way. So I do that now. I teach a couple classes, just one at a time. I'm teaching world religions right now here at Marymount, where we swear and talk about the Bible, and we will also talk about Hinduism and Buddhism and Scientology and Yoruba, amongst other things. You know, because I even get some crazy assignments. So I do that, and I'm also getting ready this upcoming January to add a third component to my business. Not just teaching, not just seeing individuals, but I'm going to have a podcast where I'm going to talk at more length about this kind of stuff. What it means to tell your story, and how we often can get trapped in the narratives of both society and the theology we get in our bones. So that's what I do. And it started with Encyclopedia Brown.
Cool. I don't have an Encyclopedia Brown story, but all of us come from very interesting and rich backgrounds. I want to date myself. I think Ames and I came to the program about the same time. This building didn't exist. The old building, which was a relic compared to this. We did most of our stuff up at main campus. Undergrad in sociology, with minor in public relations, 20 years in marketing, working for Pentagon, 1983 I graduated from undergrad, and been working in various capacities with the military for about 34 years. Did marketing, public relations, trade show management, all that stuff for 20 years, so the marketing piece to what I do now, I got the foundation, doing that work. Counseling was something, you grow up as kids, all my prep school buddies, they would tell me all the problems, et cetera, and I didn't really think about it as counseling, but I mean, they would talk to you, whatever happened. I always wondered why they would want to come and talk to me about that, but somehow they always end up on my doorstep. And so I kind of got an early, kind of a feet in the water type of a feel for it. My brother's Down syndrome, he was born with Down syndrome, so I began advocacy for him when he was born in 65, and that has continued until present. So I would say that my brother trained me for what I'm doing now. wonderful experience for the things that I've encountered over the course of his life. Was working at Fort Belvoir, and at the time, as a trade show manager, was traveling all over, loving life. Good money was good, and all of a sudden my mentor said, "You need to get a life and consider your purpose." So I'm thinking, okay, well, yeah. And so I came to Marymount. This was in 2000. Came to one of the programs. Tammy was one of the first people I met. Back in the day, that's her picture. She took it down. She took that down. That was back in the day. That's why she looked at that picture. She's like, "Oh my God." But came to Marymount, went to one of the little meetings like you guys are doing here, and it was a wrap. Everything just kind of exploded from that vantage point, and started, I think, part-time because I was working, and then it evolved into full-time. I did not come to Marymount with the intention of doing a dual program. That was not, I was not looking to do that. The clinical work was going well. I mean, Ames and I, we had to go all the way out to Reston to go to class. We had classes out in Reston. I don't know if that campus is still open or not, but anyway. Yeah, it's been a journey. Got into it, and then all of a sudden there was a forensic piece, which I love forensics. Quite a bit of work with court cases, worked in jails and prisons and so forth. A lot of guys who killed people, who raped people, all that kind of good stuff. I always say that the fruit is at the end of the limb, so that's where the work is richest for me. Military guys and those specific populations. Each of us has niche areas that we were drawn to, and you've heard some of those similar stories. And so the forensics thing kind of happened, did another few extra hours, and voila, 2 degrees. And I think there was 2 of us that initially graduated out of the program. And then it evolved, and then it kind of came. Is it still?
It's alive and well.
Oh, cool. So yeah, check it out.
And very popular.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So forensics is an amazing field. I mean, there's so much to the science of forensics, particularly in criminology and so forth. So if you guys are checking it out, go for it. It's I still do a lot of that work. My practice is it's like I love a lot of stuff. I don't like to one-dimensionalize my practice. I'm always in the mode of learning. So right now I'm about to finish up my doctorate. I'm working on a dissertation in Virginia Tech, so don't beat me up over there, guys. And so hopefully next September I'll be done with that clinical, whatever they call it, counselor education supervision. And so I developed a model with the military, an alternative treatment program for warriors returning from war and their family members. Because a lot of times the military doesn't help our veterans transition back into civilian life, particularly with their families. Because you come back from war, you're different. And your family's different. And sometimes the twains don't meet. So there's got to be more work in that. And so I've created a program through the work that I've done over the years that we're launching. It's already kind of launched, but it's going to grow bigger. So got into counseling 2005. I got my license in Maryland. We all took shortcuts to get our license because Virginia was 4,000 hours. It was insane to get LPC. So we took shortcuts. I went through Maryland, got to 3,000, swung back around, worked in the Center for Well-Being. Yeah, I did a little part-time action down there at Falls Church, where Ames started at, and did a little practice on the weekends with them. Then kind of evolved, went back to Maryland. A kid came with me, we're in Gettysburg. I did practice in Maryland, then Virginia. Went to Hawaii, was licensed there for 3 years, worked there, worked a lot with the military, did a lot of contract work. So my practice has a lot of multifaceted areas in it. I like that because I hate to be bored. I don't want to one-dimensionalize what it is that I do. I always tell my clinicians, and particularly as we advocate for mental health folks out here, those of us in the business, never one-dimensionalize your gifts. Always be in the moment of learning. Always reach out and go farther. Ames just opened up another place in McLean, so she's really, branching out, which is really wonderful to see that happen. So we're in Springfield now. Business is booming. I do a little bit of everything, contract work, trainings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Won't get into all that. But my heart is for the military. for our warriors, our veterans, and I'm looking forward to really blowing that work up. This is a rich place to do that type of stuff. If you have any questions, certainly look forward to addressing them in the time that we have this evening. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Emily Snyder, and I never in my wildest imagination thought that number one, I would be working in the field of education and counseling, and number two, that I would have my own business. So this has kind of been an evolution for me. I am an educational consultant, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But moving into the field of educational consulting was a second career for me. When I was growing up, I grew up in outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's in a little small town that most of the individuals who lived there worked in the steel mills and coal mines. And it was very important for my family, for me to be going to college. So I would, and particularly as a female, I was a first generation female college student. My parents didn't necessarily have a concern about what I majored in or what I did as long as I got that degree. So I went to a very small liberal arts college called Washington and Jefferson and got a degree in English literature. I thought when I went there I was going to be a lawyer. They do a lot of pre-professional training. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, then I thought maybe I'd be a doctor, because that's kind of what students or children from my area, if they were going to go to college, that's what they did. But I fell in love with writing and had some great professors there who helped me along the way. When I graduated from there, I then came to DC actually, and had the luxury of working on Capitol Hill and fell into education policy. From there, I then went to work for the Department of Treasury, and I fell into a job in something that was called centralized training and development. And from there, my career and my interest in both counseling and education took off. I worked in education policy in Fairfax County for a long time. I actually had the opportunity to, I guess it was an opportunity looking back on it, there was good things and not so good things about it in terms of education policy, but I did have the opportunity to sit on the Fairfax County School Board and help them transition from being, when they went to from appointments to elections. And during that time, I enjoyed it very much. I met a lot of wonderful people who helped me along the way. And one thing I'll say now is that one thing I learned in my program at Marymount is about the need to network in order to stay relevant. And for me, that's been key all along, but I'll talk a little bit about that more in a minute. So I worked in education policy locally in Fairfax, and also a little bit at the state and the federal level. And then in the 1990s, a lot of things converged in my life. My daughters, I had two daughters who were 14 and 16. And public policy is really, if you're going to do a good job at it, it's really a 24/7 job. And I felt like I needed to be more at home with them as my youngest entered high school and my oldest was thinking about the college process. So I took about 3 or 4 months to reevaluate what do I really want to do with my life at this stage. And a number of individuals that I know came to me for advice, particularly those families that had students who were at risk and maybe had some struggles in the public school system and were going through the disciplinary process. So I kind of helped guide them through that. I would not say I was an advocate because I didn't have necessarily that background, but I did consult with them and help them navigate that process. As I looked forward and thought about what I really wanted to do and how could I combine the skills that I had developed with what I believed was going to happen due to state mandates that were changing, due to budget constraints in public education, how could I take the knowledge that I had and use that as a way to help students and families. So I work part-time with, again, those at-risk students, helping them navigate the process, as well as helping families understand the public school options that they had, and if they wanted to look at private schools, what were their options. In fact, that's how I met Emily's mother, Jean, because her mother's a was a private school consultant. And one of the things about the field of educational consulting, this was reinforced again in our in the school counseling program I was here at Marymount, is a need to join professional organizations and to be active in those organizations, not only as a voice for the students, but also in terms of as a way to share the information that you have so that you can learn from others and they can learn from you. So I had a little practice part-time, and then I decided, as families started to come back to me, who I'd worked with, to look at the college process, I had no knowledge about that. I was like, what? My kids are going through this, so if you want me to work with you, you have to understand that I'm learning it as we go. And then I realized that this is what I really love to do, is to help these young students fulfill their potential. We were starting to see students who had a lot to offer but felt like they had nothing. They didn't see their accomplishments. So one of the things I strive to do, and again I learned about the importance of this through the school counseling program here, was how do you help children, young adults, teenagers, understand who they are, what they've accomplished, and what they can accomplish in the future. So I thought, all right, I can do this. I know I can do this. I've been doing it part-time, but I need some kind of credential behind me. Because why would people hire me? What do I have to show that I know what I'm doing? So I looked at a number of programs. I looked at all the ones in the area. And one of the reasons and they each have a different focus and structure. So depending upon what you want to do, different programs at different schools are worthwhile. But the thing that enticed me about Marymount was the practical experience that you get along with the theory. So not only did I learn the theory, but I had a 100-hour practicum, and I had a 600-hour internship. And those were really, for me, what I felt would give me the actual hands-on experience that I need. So I enrolled in the program. I was very fortunate at the time. There were like 25. We had a big class and we really formed a great bond. A lot of those individuals I know have stayed connected for a while after we all graduated, and we were really very close at that time. One of the things that I love about the Marymount program is again, it goes back to networking and staying relevant, and they were so focused on that, and that was very, very helpful. And in my work as an educational consultant, I belong to lots of organizations. I'm involved in those organizations and spend a lot of time in professional development activities. So after I got my school counseling degree, I opened a very small practice in Fairfax called Know Your Options, and it's an educational consulting firm. We've been in practice for 16 years, and it's morphed over time. I did start, as I mentioned, with one direction, but now we only do college consulting and graduate and professional schools consulting. We added the graduate and professional schools consulting about 7 years ago when families again came back and said, can you help with this? And I did not want to take it on at that time. So I was referring to other people around the country, and then interestingly enough, my daughter graduated from law school, and we had used a consultant out of New York for her, and she said, Mom, this is what I really want to do. She had her undergraduate degree from George Mason in peer mediation and conflict resolution, and she went to law school not to become a lawyer, but to understand the law so that she could work in the peer mediation and conflict resolution field. And one of the things she discovered while she was at law school was there were so many students who were at law school for reasons other than to be a lawyer, and that they wanted help in terms of what can I do with my law, what can I do with this law degree? She also had a number of friends who wanted help with graduate schools, looking at PhD programs, business schools, medical schools, so she came into practice. We also had an individual who was the director of student services, that was called at the time, at a local high school, who had retired and asked if she could come and work with us. And we put her under a 1-year contract. She loved the work after she retired because it was working with students, and it brought a different element to our practice. She could work with students. We could work with more students who had learning disabilities with her specialty. But what she discovered, and one thing I would encourage people to think about, is she was used to public school hours. And in educational consulting, you work afternoons, weekends, and evenings. And so for her, that was what she didn't like about it. We have a great practice. It's just really a wonderful thing. I really can't say enough about it. If you're interested in it, I'll be happy to talk with you about it. The other thing that it allows me to do is work with students who are underprivileged. I work with students through something called College Access Fairfax, and we raise the money and we work with families on the financial aid piece. So we raise the money to bring what we call champions into 10 high schools in Fairfax County that have a significant free and reduced population. And the champions come in and we sponsor what we call Super Saturdays, where families can bring in their financial aid forms and we help them fill those out. The counselors are staffed to schools for 6 months of the year on a part-time basis where families can make appointments to go in. And for me, it ties in what I learned about Marymount through counseling and the importance of it. It keeps me in the education field and it gives me a sense of giving back to the community.
So can we have a hand for our panel? So we've been talking at you for about 45 minutes or so, and thank you all. You did very well with your time. One of the things that I do want to say about our programs is I think pretty much what all of these folks went through, we were a 48 credit program. I think, Emily, you might have been 51. You might have been 51. And I did 60, and you did 60 as well. We're now 60 credit hours, and that's more than some of the other programs in the area, but there's a reason why we do that. We feel like the 60 credit hours, first of all, it's required for our accreditation, which is K-Prep. So let me say this. If you are going to go back and get your graduate degree, you do want to get your degree from a K-Prep accredited institution. It's just kind of where the bar is set, and it's what folks look for in terms of credentialing. The other thing that I want to say is that if you are thinking about going into school counseling, what those 60 credit hours does is gives you, and Jen alluded to this, gives you the coursework that you would need should you ever want to go back and go for your LPC. And as a matter of fact, the practicum and internship hours in any of our programs do count toward your Virginia licensure for LPC. In school counseling, when you graduate, you are licensed through or eligible for license through the Virginia Department of Education. So you're able to get a job and a provisional license as a school counselor right away. Our clinical mental health folks and pastoral clinical mental health folks are continuing to accumulate the hours, but they sit for the National Clinical Mental Health Counseling Exam or the National Counseling Exam so that they have what they need for licensure. So there's some specific things, but what I love about, and the theme that I hear here is that even though their educational experiences were similar, they shared courses, we shared courses across specializations, and then we also have specialty-specific coursework. That's another thing that makes us unique. But they were able to take all of this and use it in such very different ways. Sounds like at least 4 or 5 private practices, starting businesses, whether in the school setting, sounds like a lot of specific populations, from the military. Otis doing such good work, to kind of everything in Amy's practice, to everything you deal with in schools, to students who are hoping, who are aspiring to do more, to students who are trying to tell or to people who are trying to tell their stories. So I think the takeaway from this is that what our programs try to do is we try to give you the foundation that will eventually be the springboard to help you do what it is that you want to do. And I think that's kind of a very unique hallmark of our programs. Most of our full-time faculty are in private practice. Those of us who don't have LPC or not in private practice are very involved with our national associations. And so we really do pride ourselves in having almost a little bit of a boutique program. Like, we really provide such specific training that if this is the work you want to do, I don't think anybody in town will teach you how to do it better than we do. And I say that very respectful of all the programs around. So I want to say all that just to say that. But I know you have some questions, so let's let you guys answer some questions. Are you going to be Vanna?
Yes.
Any questions? And it can be for anyone, or it can be for,
And if you would be willing to wait for the microphone, that would be great.
Okay. I just had a question about like counseling. So I want to do school counseling, but I've heard that it's like really limiting. So I'm not sure what to get my graduate degree in. So I don't know if I should do school counseling or if I should do social work. From some social work, I know a couple like social workers, and they're always telling me that like if you want to do school counseling, that's fine, but you might like end up being stuck. And I know I don't want to do school counseling forever. Like, it's only like maybe like a 5-10 year plan of mine, and I want to like do something different. It's because I don't like to do the same things over and over again. So yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
I think there's a button.
Can you hear me?
There's a button. There's a button. I didn't see the button either. There you go.
I think I pressed the button.
It's on.
Okay. Yeah, and Amy might be able to speak because she has a background. She did some social work study and also the counseling, and so she might be able to speak to that particular part of your question. I don't think the school counseling degree is limiting, specifically for the reasons that Dr. Davis just mentioned, that you're graduating with 60 credits. If you wanted to work towards licensure at the same time you were working as a school counselor, many people, I wouldn't say anywhere near like the majority of school counselors do that, but it's an option, and I know several who are doing it. I know an elementary school counselor who's doing that. I'm working on doing that. One of the people in the school counseling office is doing that. None of these people are doing that because they want to get out of schools. They're doing that because it opens options. I know as a middle school counselor, my day's done at 3 o'clock. Like, I'd like to have options, but I don't find it limiting in that way. I will say that, like I said before, I think school counseling is a fantastic place to be and a wonderful job if you love schools. You get to do a lot of counseling. You get to do a lot of collaboration. You get to do a lot of consultation, but you really do have to love the school setting. And so, social work is a great field too. I mean, there are lots of social workers I work with in the school and outside of the school, and definitely lots of great options in that way. But I wouldn't call it limiting.
And actually, can I add to that? Because I also want to make sure that there's not any confusion, because when you graduate with your degree in school counseling, you're able to get a job as a school counselor. But you also have that option of adding the LPC. You can't do it the other way around. Once you have your clinical mental health degree, if you want to add school counseling in the state of Virginia, you can only do that with another master's degree in school counseling. So if you're on the fence about clinical mental health or school, you would need to do school first, just because otherwise you're going back for coursework, you're going back to do another practicum and internship and things like that.
I think it's great you're asking these questions.
Yes.
And I will just say, I'm very, explore the field. I'm so open to answering questions. I know all my colleagues in schools are open to answering questions because we're really eager to get good people in there too. And so as much as we can do to sort of help people determine if it's the right field for them, we're happy to do it. So, yeah. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Alicia Pate. My question is open for everyone on the panel. My program of interest is clinical mental health counseling. And I just want to know, what was your experience? Well, did any of you work full-time while being in the program? So how was it balancing the two? And how was it as far as the coursework? Was it, were the classes flexible? Were they morning or evening? Like, how was that experience for you?
You know, a lot of it just depends on you. You know, me, I love doing a lot of different things, and it takes a lot of energy to be able to do that. It is exhausting, but you know, if you're pursuing it, you got to work, you got to take care of your bills, whatever have you. If you're single and you're doing the business, or you know, you have family or whatever have you, you got to look at all of those variables in terms of what you need to do to be able to make ends meet, take care of your expenses, and so forth. But a lot of it depends on what you feel your passion is, and you know, you got to get up on it if you want it, and so you do what it takes to achieve. So it just depends on, you know, what it is that you want, what the direction is. The great thing about this program is it's multifaceted. It's a great foundation. You can build on this and go anywhere. So you will get that here in this school. So it just depends on what it is that you want. I think for me, I worked, I enjoyed doing it, but then when I was able to not work and go full time, I was able to do that. That process via student loans, which, you know, some of us have those, hate them, but, you know, it does allow you the opportunity to be able to pursue your passion, and it's an investment in yourself. So think about it from that perspective.
Just to add, from the school perspective, so I worked full-time when I was going through this program. And I was working in a place that was flexible with me, which, you know, I couldn't have done that otherwise. I will say, when it comes to the internship, specifically in schools, you're working in a school basically part-time, so 2.5 days a week, and it's during school hours. So that does put some limitations on what you're able to do. And so just in those situations, I think, I mean, when you're thinking ahead in those terms, that can be limiting, and it can make it difficult to keep the job you have exactly as it looks now. But if you have a flexible company, hopefully, or work group, they're able to work with you.
Definitely you need flexibility to do it. And you need energy, you need a lot of self-care. I'm gonna see if I can find this quote, because it makes me think about a little bit about how you can or cannot do things. So bear with me, okay? This might be a little therapist hokey.
Right.
But I just saw this quote. I love quotes. So this quote says, no, we do not need more sleep. It's our souls that are tired, not our bodies. We need nature, we need magic, we need adventure, we need freedom, we need truth, we need stillness. We don't need more sleep, we need to wake up and live. So the last sentence, we need to wake up and live, is, I mean, I think many people have the capacity, time limited, right? You know, this is going to be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years stretch, whatever. I mean, that's not a drop in the bucket, but there's an end in sight. And if it's something you're passionate about, and then energetically, as long as you take care of yourself and you can manage your finances and your household and all the other things that we all have unique, you know, situations to manage, you can do it. But it is about plugging in to your passion and, you know, really finding that, I think. It's kind of a hokey answer, but we all have the same amount of time in a day, and many of us we all vary in efficiency or lack of efficiency. If you're gonna do this while working, you have to be pretty darn efficient.
Yeah.
And plugged in.
And I will say,
To be
logistically, most of the coursework is either a 3:30 or 6:30 class. Every now and then, you might have a class, especially as you get to your practicum and internship, that's maybe a 12:30 class or something like that. And your class might be early in the morning, but no, it's not. So it's at night as well.
Yeah, so I'm trying to make
There's
it.
a button, there is a
Okay,
button.
I got it. So I didn't work, and I was young enough that I don't know who would have hired me full time because I didn't know what I was doing. But I do work with a lot of what I think of as like second career, like people who are really grounded, have a good paying job. And I will say, from my perspective of teaching them, they tend to stretch out the program longer. So it takes them, I don't know, maybe like 3.5 years versus if you just go straight through, it's about 2. And they tend to, once they're getting close to clinical practice, either have a very flexible job or decide to leave that job with the intention of moving forward after. And I know it's a real struggle for a lot of people because it is that balance of you want to be financially secure enough that you can do all the self-care and like also just take care of your basic needs. but it does get to be a lot, especially when you get to clinical practice. So I just really feel you, and I've talked to a lot of students about that struggle of how do I balance this, or how do I know when it's time to let it go?
How about we take 2 more in the large group and then give people the chance to do one-on-one questions for timing?
Okay.
So I do.
Hi, I'm not sure exactly who this question is for, but it kind of is a little bit related to your question as well, Alicia. So I just had a question about if, is it possible to do the program part-time but also have like a 6 or 9 hour credit assistantship? I don't know if Dr. Davis, if that's for you or the panelists, but.
Well, I will tell you,
Thank you.
graduate assistantships are a little difficult to come by. We are doing our best, and as a matter of fact, I was just reading an assessment report today that's saying that we're trying to add more and those kinds of things. So unfortunately, not every student can have an assistantship, but there are some available across the university. There's certainly some in our department and graduate admissions and the School of Education in general. But part-time is what a lot of students do, and that tends to be 6 credits or 9. A lot of our students do take advantage of financial aid, but in terms of guarantees of assistantships, that's something that we can't do. But like Amy said, Amy got hired at the university, and if you get hired for employment at the university, then you get big tuition breaks and things like that. So she kind of parlayed her admissions work into that. So it just varies. I will tell you, graduate admissions does a really good job of helping you tap into those resources. I'm actually in charge of the graduate assistance and counseling, so as those opportunities become available, I let students know about that if I hear of things in other departments. So one of the things that I think is unique about Marymount is that we're small enough. I mean, our counseling program is large. We admitted 72 students, so it was a record this year, so it's a large program. But we're small enough that if you have a need and you want to come here, we will do our best to help you tap into the resources to do that. I don't know if that answered your question. I'll tell you, the school counseling program operates in a cohort model. It's either a 2-year full-time or 3-year part-time program. Clinical mental health does not operate in that cohort model, but it's still, as Jen said, usually either 2 or 3 to 3.5. We don't kick you out if you're not done in 3.5 years. We've had some people who life has happened, and so maybe they've been with us 5 years. So, but you have an advisor that works closely with you. So we take your education very seriously, but we also realize that you have a life. And so I think we're very, very understanding, and we'll work with you in any way that we can to accommodate you in any way that we can. So, did anybody want to answer that about? Yeah, okay. Austin.
Thanks. This question is mostly directed at Amy and Jen, but anyone else is welcome to answer. So I'm a first-year clinical mental health counseling student with no prior clinical practical experience. So I'm glad, Amy, that you mentioned Crisis Link as a sort of resource for those students like myself to get their feet wet, so to speak. So I was wondering what other resources or what other avenues you all know of to sort of gain that experience when you don't have it, and then to talk about why Jen is relevant to the question. You mentioned things that you said you weren't going to do. Like, I'm not going to work with people with schizophrenia. I'm not going to work evenings. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. But you ended up doing that. So was it a matter of getting out of your comfort zone? And do you feel that it's important to get out of your comfort zone when you explore options like that?
Lots of head nodding, yeah.
Can I answer mine first, Amy? Is that okay? Because I don't have any, I guess, beyond Crisis Link. I think sometimes we really restrict ourselves and we create stories, narratives, or just expectations of what something is going to be. And I have found often when I say, I'm just not going to do that, if I try it, I end up really loving it. Like, I really love Brussels sprouts right now. And I think it's because bars are frying them with honey and bacon grease, but So much of this work is helping people step outside of a comfort zone, and a comfort zone is not always pleasant, but anxiety is comfortable for people who have intense anxiety because that's where you live. And in order to grow, we have to get uncomfortable. And I think that's a lot of what I learn on a daily basis, sitting with my clients, going to supervision, doing the reading, all the kinds of things that I do, is if I don't step outside of my comfort zone, if I don't challenge myself to do more, then I become stagnant, and stagnant things stink. And I am not interested in living that kind of life. So I try to do things that I'm scared of, at least once a month. And I guess like I'm kind of starting to run out of them, so I need to open my horizons, because no longer do public speaking or individuals with thought disorders or even characterological disorders, none of that scares me.
Come work in a middle school.
It's scary. Go back to dog school.
I just don't want to have to do that much reading. So yes, I do think that's just part of this. And sometimes, actually, I think the most uncomfortable thing we can do is to sit still and not work, but to really sit with whatever's going on. So that's my answer to your more existential question. I liked it.
I do bring up Crisis Link because it has such a strong basic training, and then you get this, it's not one-on-one, it's over the phone, and I think that kind of helps the comfort zone for a person that doesn't have a lot of clinical experience, not sit right in front of a person. But the training, I mean, I haven't done it forever, but anybody that's ever come through to internship that has done that for the reason of getting that is really, I think, highlighted how that was really important. But I guess to piggyback on, so I don't know of any like other trainings. There's a lot of places that work with people that, of course, exposure to human beings, whether it be like in a church setting or a community-based setting or whatever, is helpful. In school, you're making me remember some of the things that they required us to do to push us outside of our comfort zone. You could kind of be strategic about, maybe make a once a month or twice a month kind of behavior chart, so to speak, to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do to really expand myself. Like, for example, in the substance abuse class, I remember going to a handful of 12-step meetings to get exposure to that. That's pretty uncomfortable if you're not familiar with 12 steps, but guess what? You learn really fast about the environment, the culture. That's a really important thing to have in your back pocket when you're sitting with people, because you might be suggesting to them that might be a good thing for them to look at. And if you don't have any exposure to it, then it's not as helpful. Same thing with the cultural diversity class. I don't know what you call it. Multicultural diversity. You know, I remember going in DC to a Baptist church that was awesome, and it was just such a great experience, but it was just not my typical Sunday. But you know, the idea of just doing a little something different than what's your norm for your life, that can just help expand you as a person, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
Otis, do you have other, are there other places, even
Oh my God,
in the military world that you can get practice without the credential?
Yeah, Marymount has got a wealth of different types of options and opportunities. Certainly the practicum, if you're a little nervous about jumping out there, the practicum is going to help you with that, because you have to do it. And so then as you get through that and you get into your internship, there's a lot more options on the table in terms of experiences and so forth. I worked at a place off of Route 1. I worked at, what's that place just down the street? Phoenix House, Women's Center. I mean, there's unbelievable opportunities out here for internship and practicum experiences. So if you're not looking to get your feet wet, you're probably in the wrong program. Because this program is going to push you for that. You have to have a passion for the work and for the pursuit of counseling. It's not an easy business. There's a lot of weighty issues that come in. There's life and death types of things that we encounter day in and day out, whether it's in an educational program or whether it's in private practice, school settings particular. I'm in a school right now, military school, and I sat in an IEP meetings this morning. With suicidal kids, kids whose parents are on deployment and so forth and so on. So those types of things are enriching to me. I don't run from them, I run to them, because that work makes you a better clinician. So, if you're nervous, that's good. Okay, you need a little bit of that to kind of keep you, centered. But don't run from it. This place will provide you with a wealth of experience before you actually get into your licensure training.
And I'd just like to say that this whole networking piece plays into that too, because once you start to meet individuals, if you establish those relationships, they'll either be people that you can call on to help you, to make referrals for you, to give you some resources, or they'll know others who will. So that's key to it. And in my field, while we do higher education consulting, and there's a perception out there that is all about helping students to get into college, you would be surprised at the number of families that come into our offices, and all of a sudden we're dealing with a child who committed suicide or someone who's into substance abuse, and you don't always anticipate that. So I think all of these take you out of your comfort zone, and I think that's a key to counseling.
Yep, absolutely.
I just have an idea, and I'm the professor right now, sitting on this table, so I'm going to give you homework first. You're the first semester.
For validation.
Tammy was my professor. Now I can call her Tammy and not Dr. Davis. Also, you guys, I can call Lisa, not Dr. JC, which is pretty exciting. I will give you the homework of researching 5 to 10 people who you look at what they're doing and go, oh man, I dig that. I really want to do something like that, and ask them out for coffee. That's your uncomfortable task to do. Report back to us next year.
Next year, right?
Can we give our panelists a round of applause? I don't know if this is the best segue, but we'd like for all of the prospective students in the room to just get a good, quick sense of what it takes to apply to the program. And I promise this will be brief so that you can spend time doing the fun part, which is mingling and talking to the panelists. So if you're a prospective student in the room and you're interested in applying to our school counseling, clinical mental health, or pastoral clinical mental health counseling program, the application is now live. Everything's online, so we require your application, your transcripts from your undergraduate institution, all institutions attended post-high school, your resume, your GRE scores. We do prefer and recommend the general test. So take the general test for the GRE, not the subject test. We also need your 2 letters of recommendation and a personal statement with a minimum of about 500 words detailing your background and motivation for entering the field of study. So those are the admissions requirements. If you are a non-native English speaker, there's a bit on the slide about those requirements. And I'm more than happy to talk to you in person during this event and after the event about all of this great information. The counseling program also has a part 2. I call it part 2 for admissions, and that's an interview that some applicants are invited to. And so you know of your decision post-interview. It is a required part of the admissions process. So you get to meet, not with folks like me in admissions, but with awesome people like Dr. Davis and other faculty who make up the counseling department. And in your packet, which I hope you received if you're a prospective student, if you did not see me, and I'll get you one, but you should have found a fee waiver code. Please use that to apply by the December 15th deadline. And also, we offer something called non-degree, and I'm more than happy to talk about that on a one-on-one basis. But if you're just itching and really wanting to take a class in the spring, or essentially you want to test out the program, non-degree allows you to take up to 9 credits over the course of 2 semesters, but no more than that. And again, we can talk more on an individual basis about that. So I'd like now to give the mic over to Dr. Davis for closing remarks. And again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. And thank you to our panelists. Let's give them another round of applause.
Okay, so maybe you have some specific questions for one of our panelists, and they have so graciously, I don't know if they know this or not, offered to hang around for a little bit. But anyway, please feel free to speak to someone, to speak to any of them individually, and we really do appreciate you coming out. And regardless of where you land for your graduate degree, we hope it's here, but please, we wish you well, and just remember that counseling can save the world. It can.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, you can say one thing, yes.
Just because on the networking side of things, this is specifically an open house, like the grand celebration, so to speak, for the new office. It is October 19th, so please come and get these. These are typically just a whole bunch of counselors and mental health professionals and colleagues that come. So it's an opportunity to meet some other kind of folks in the community that are doing counseling work and to see our new space.
And I think some of our other panelists have cards and things like that as well. So please feel free to connect. And we do appreciate you coming out.
And we hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Yeah.